My name is Kelly Cunningham and I'm the Managing Director and Co-founder of Your Leasing Co. Your Leasing Co is a company who helps commercial tenants negotiate their leases with their landlords, evening out that power imbalance that often occurs when those two parties have to come together for a negotiation. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes just talking you through some ideas that I wanted to share with you about things that are important when you're negotiating your next lease, and in particular important for bakeries or cafes or people in that bakery space. So the first thing to remember is to think about the market rent. Now, when you're paying a certain amount of money per year in rent, every cent that you don't pay goes straight to your bottom line. So our job is to make sure that you are paying the market rent and not much more. To determine what the market rent is, you need to figure out, if my tenancy was vacant, how much would it be on the market for to lease? That will help you understand what the market rent is. If there's comparable properties that are located around you, similar size, similar location, and they're vacant, what is the landlord trying to get to lease those premises? What is the rent that they're asking for? That is the kind of rent that you would be looking for when you're trying to negotiate your lease renewal, because that is what the market rent is. The rent that you're currently paying on your lease and your premises is only the rent that you're paying because 5 years ago or 3 years ago you decided on a rent, and that's escalated every year by 3%, 4%, CPI, whatever the review mechanism was. So that's the only reason that's the rent that you've got today, not because it's necessarily the market rent. So when you're negotiating a renewal, make sure you have a look at the market rent and try and negotiate your rent down to that level. Now, on that note, we talked briefly just then about the reviews. Reviews are really important. It's very, very different whether you're signing up for a CPI or whether you're signing up for 3% reviews. If you've got a fixed 3% review, you know exactly how much you're going to be paying year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. If you're signing up for a CPI rent review, it could vary. At the moment, CPI sits at about 8% in most states of Australia, so it's quite a heavy lift if you're having your rent increase by that amount each year. So if you can keep it to a fixed 3% review or even 2%, even better. But that's something to think about. CPI does alter and it can go from 2%. At some point it was 2%. So if you're going to have a CPI rent review in your lease, then make sure you have a CPI rent review but capped at a maximum of 4%, for example, which means that the landlord can get CPI, but it's no more than 4%. So when CPI is sitting at 2%, that's great, you'll get 2%, but in any event it's no more than 4%, for example. The other thing to think about in your lease is the security on the lease. It's something that's often quite contentious, and people often say to me, but I didn't think you could negotiate out of personal guarantees. Well, there's two forms of security that you will have on your lease. You will have a bank guarantee or a security deposit. That's effectively a cash bond that you give to the landlord, and it's often about 3 months worth of rent. And that's for the landlord to hold on to in cash that they can easily convert to cash and use if they need it. The second thing is a personal guarantee. And if your lease is in your own personal name, then you're automatically providing a personal guarantee. But if your lease is in your company name, then the landlord will often ask for a personal guarantee from the directors of that business. Now, what that means is that those directors, who are the personal guarantors, are personally responsible and personally liable for all of the obligations under that lease. So if anything fails along the way, doesn't work out, you need to exit, then the landlord has the ability under the lease to chase those people individually and sell their personal assets to recover any loss that they may experience as a result of you hopping out of the lease. So that's something that is quite an onerous obligation in a lease, and it does get negotiated out of a lease very, very often. So it's certainly not something that must go in every lease. Landlords will always ask for it because they love to have that belt and braces approach where they've got all the security in the world, but they don't need it. A security deposit or a bank guarantee is often enough, and that's generally about 3 months rent. Sometimes you can negotiate to get out of the personal guarantees by offering a 4-month bank guarantee or something like that. But that's something that's super important for you to think about when you're negotiating your next lease renewal. Now, one of the things that's particularly interesting and appropriate, I guess, to chat about for bakeries and food-based businesses is access hours and out-of-hours trading charges. So the shopping centre has core trading hours if you're in a shopping centre environment that you must trade. But often bakeries and food businesses require access earlier than that. They might need to come in at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, well before the shopping centre is open. And often that means the landlord incurs costs for a security guard to come and unlock the shopping centre, or additional costs at the end if you want to stay later. And sometimes the landlord will say, well, there are costs for that. If there's not direct access to your tenancy from an external door or something like that, and they actually have to engage somebody to come in and unlock the door for you, then they may charge you for that. So that's something that you need to negotiate as part of your deal, because if you're paying a substantial rent, then you don't want to be paying extra costs every day to be coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning just to operate your business. Ideally, you'll have an external door that you can use, that you can access your tenancy and don't need to go into the common area of the shopping centre, which means that you can go and do your preparation and things like that without requiring any further access or any further people. But if you don't, then that's certainly something that you need to discuss when you're working through your lease negotiation with the landlord. So the final thing I wanted to talk about was make good on your tenancy. When you're a bakery or a food business, often you've spent money on things like services, bringing in exhaust or additional drainage or water or all those kinds of services that only food businesses need for refrigeration and things like that. And putting those things in is an expensive exercise, but also taking them out is as well. And often the landlord asks you to take the tenancy back to a bare shell, which sometimes means it's everything back to bare concrete floor, no ceiling, no shop front. So doing that is quite an expensive exercise, and if you have to take all of your services back to the base, then that's even more expensive. It could be $20,000 or $30,000 or more. So it's something that you could negotiate with your landlord, that you will take out your fixtures and fittings, but you're not going to take all of the services back to their original location, because that could save you quite a lot of money when you get to that point in your lease. So those are just a few tips that I have for you today to think about when you're negotiating your next lease. And if you want to think about getting some help with that, we can certainly do that. Now, if you're a member of the NBIA, we do have a special offer for members of the NBIA, and if you're on an existing lease, we can review that lease for you and provide you with some customized ideas and personalized thoughts about what you might do to improve your lease conditions. Also, we have a free phone hotline which you can call at any time to ask us any questions you may have about your lease and your leasing conditions. So please feel free to give us a call on that. My details will come up at the end of this little video, and please feel free to reach out on the 1300 number or send us through an email. We'd be more than happy to help you.